Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Futurum Tech Webcast. I'm your host, Shelly Kramer, and I'm joined today by Maria Tringali, who's a senior solutions consultant for Avalara. And we are going to talk today about everybody's favorite topic, taxes. And and what we're going to cover is everything businesses need to know about sales tax. I don't know about you, but this is not something that's my favorite thing to think about. So I need all the help I can get. So, just to set the stage here, understanding sales tax is hard. Staying compliant is sometimes even harder, especially when rules change on a regular basis. And if you feel confused or overwhelmed by the mere mention of sales tax, trust me, you are not alone. I am at the very top of that list. We are going to talk about things like economic nexus, exemption certificates, sourcing rules, business license management. If hearing those terms make your head spin, then this conversation is truly for you. So, what we know is that few US businesses who collect and remit sales tax understand all the rules or how to comply with them. This has been further exacerbated by a global pandemic. And, there's also been many new or changed rules over the course of the last couple of years. So, what do you need to know to get it right? That's exactly what Maria and I are going to be talking about today. Maria, welcome to the show. You are everybody's savior today.
Thanks, Shelley. Delighted to be here.
Absolutely. Well, before we dive into sales tax, I want to know your backstory. Tell us a little bit about your career path and what got you to where you are today.
Sure, I'd be happy to. It's sort of funny, maybe like some of us, it's an obscure path to where I am today, but I spent my first life and my first career in the hospitality business. So I was in the hotel sales and marketing for many years. And then was actually a customer of mine that encouraged me to look into software living in Seattle. We have a lot of technology. And he said,
Right.
you're really sharp. I think you'd be very successful in the technology business. And so he actually introduced me to a friend that needed some help with a project. And I ended up getting hired by them as a salesperson. So I migrated over, very lucky, from the hospitality business into software. And then I was there for about 5 years. And then I migrated over to Avalara. So I've been with Avalara in the tax compliance business for 7 years now, and I've migrated up to, or not I've migrated, but I've become one of the company's specialists on selling to selling exempt, and so people who are in the B2B business and don't think they have a lot of sales tax compliance or risk, and helping them understand the actual what compliance is. It's not just tax rates.
Very cool. I have 15-year-old twin daughters who are
Ah,
sophomores in high school. And one of the conversations that I have with them on the regular is to try and think about, when you think about a career path, what you want to think about is something that, everybody always needs, right?
right.
And what you do working with a company like Avalara, like everybody always needs this. It's
Hmm.
not temporary. It's not impacted by a global pandemic. The business doesn't ever go away. The needs don't ever go away. So I love the fact that your career path kind of led you down here because it makes perfect sense, right?
It does. It's also always changing. So
Yeah,
it's one of the things I love about this job is there's
yeah,
always something new to learn. It never gets old. Regulations
right,
are always changing. New
right.
industries are popping up. It's fascinating. Yeah.
Well, right. I remember having a conversation with our accountant in the last couple of years. And when the tax changes went into effect in 2017, it was just like, oh my gosh, sweeping change. And they were busier than they'd ever been. And now we have some additional changes or things kicked in, or whatever. So you're right. If you love change and you love kind of diving in and sussing out all the details associated with change, this is a perfect spot, right? So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about Avalara, if you would.
Sure. So Avalara was founded in 2004 and was founded by a gentleman who thought that tax compliance should be easier for small to medium sized businesses. Why do the enterprise businesses have all the money and they can
Right,
create some custom platforms and some custom algorithms or whatever they were
right.
doing? Why can't we make this easier for smaller businesses? So
Right.
he came up with the concept of keeping all the information in the cloud and passing that down to a system and doing a calculation. So he really was, early adopter of cloud-based technology and building partnerships with platforms. So fast forward to today, we have over 1,000 of these partnerships. So our mantra is these pre-built integrations with wherever you create an invoice. We integrate with you and help you create tax or do create a tax determination at the time of sale. And we've also grown into global markets and other things such as tax research, business licenses,
Right.
exemption certificates, all sorts of things that have to do with compliance now. So really an end-to-end
Yeah.
compliance solution provider globally now.
That's awesome. Everything you need in one place. Minimize headaches,
Yeah.
stress, all of that. So we talked about this just a minute ago. We touched on it, but tax legislation has changed a lot over the past few years. I know you probably have some highlights that you can give us that companies should be aware of. So let's hear it.
Yeah, there have been some changes, and you may have heard of these, Shelley, and our audience may have heard of the economic nexus laws that were now passed, or the Supreme Court made the decision in
Right.
2018 that states can now require businesses to remit tax to them if you just by shipping in their products into their state. You don't have to have a physical presence any longer. So that decision went all the way to the Supreme Court. And so now all of our states, all the 46 jurisdictions that have sales tax, do have economic nexus laws. And I want to say laws, Shelley. I'll say it probably 6 times. So what's happened is they got touted originally as internet laws. And so for some
Right.
reason, a lot of people felt that, well, if I don't have a website or I'm not selling on the website or I'm not shipping anything via my website, the laws don't apply to me. And that's
Wrong.
actually not correct. Think about it this way. The state, if you're sending something into their state, no matter how it gets there, whether you deliver it on a truck or yourself, or it doesn't matter how I purchased it, it matters where that product is getting used, and the state wants a cut of that revenue. So we have a lot of businesses that are trying to catch up and understand those laws. But that was a
Right.
really big change, and I think maybe got sort of mismarketed out there initially that they were just internet laws. So
Yeah, that is a ginormous change. Anything else we need to be aware of?
Well, that's really the biggest
The
change,
biggest one?
and I would say that states continually change too, so now that those laws are out there and they made a decision a couple of years ago on what they thought the thresholds might be, they continue to change, so businesses have to continue to
Right.
watch out and, see what has changed and make sure they stay compliant. And the other thing businesses are changing is you probably know this if you're in business, but anything that's intangible, nobody agrees on how to tax it. So if you
Right.
sell services or you sell downloadable software, anything you can't touch, nobody really agrees on how to tax it. So states are continually changing how
Right.
they want you to apply taxability to different products and services to generate more revenue. So that's another thing you have to keep up on is taxability.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've touched on a couple of these things, but my next question is, really what are some of the biggest challenges that business face today as it relates to tax compliance? I mean,
Yeah.
you don't know what you don't know, of
You don't know
course.
what you don't know. Exactly. One of my dear friends runs a manufacturing firm, and I always ask him, "How can we be more helpful to manufacturers?" And he's like, "We just don't know what we don't know. So you can tell us,
Yeah,
start from the basics, right?
right. That's
Start
my
from the
favorite that's my favorite dadism. We
what's that?"
don't know what we don't know until we know.
And this guy is such a dad, so that's actually perfect. Yes, perfect. So yeah, it's true. So well, I would say what businesses don't know is how those laws affected their business. That is the biggest thing. We start every conversation at Avalara with, do you understand how those new laws affect your business and are you compliant? There's that. And then there's also, we did already touch on this, but there's also keeping up. How is a business, how is a small business supposed to keep up with all these changing things and make sure they stay compliant? So I think the biggest challenge is just knowing or partnering, knowing who to partner with and who to get help from. And also take the responsibility. These are also laws. Some businesses like to just kind of stick their head in the sand, right? And we see a lot of businesses
Right.
that aren't compliant. And then when you get so far behind with the state, you can end up owing millions of dollars. And you have to be really, you have to make sure you're a good steward of your business. So
Yeah, sticking head in sand is rarely the best strategy,
Yeah.
especially when it relates to anything having to do with taxes,
Right?
tax compliance, and all that, right?
Yeah.
So how do businesses what do businesses do to try to learn about new tax laws or new laws that affect them and how they can stay compliant? I mean, to me, I'm a business owner. I've been a business owner for 25 years. Today, I own a family of companies. My most hated task any day of the week, any week of the year has anything to do with taxes, right?
Interesting.
I don't want
Yes.
to do it. I don't want to mess with it. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to do the research. I don't want to. So what
Right.
do I do? What do businesses do to learn about or to try to stay on top of all this? I have a feeling I know what the answer is, but
Well,
but what?
it is partner with somebody. We don't
Yeah,
expect you. I don't even expect, the teams that I work with and train to remember everything. I definitely don't.
yeah,
Partner with people who know what they're doing. And
yeah,
by that, I mean specifically partner with a business like Avalara that can
yeah.
help you. We can help you understand your compliance requirements as well as help you with automation if that's what's needed. You can also partner with a CPA practice, but make promise me it's a CPA that has a SALT practice within a state and local tax
Right,
practice. Generally, your local CPA, as you probably know, Shelley, your local CPA is not going to know anything about tax compliance in Texas or
right,
outside of your state. They're just
right.
not going. They just don't have that expertise. So if you do partner with someone, and we do this thing called in the industry, we do this thing called a nexus study or a sales tax risk assessment. So we can help you understand pretty quickly where the laws might have affect you and what any back liability you might
Right.
have, and then what do we do moving forward. We can create a plan, whether that's
Got
a
it.
phased approach or you only wanted part of it or whatever that is. Consultants and our team can help you decide what is the best path for your company to get current. That's really the biggest thing I could say is you don't understand how those laws have affected you.
Right.
Please promise me you'll start there because that's really the most important. You can read up on it, and there's lots of
Right.
resources. Avalara has amazing free resources. There's lots of
Right.
resources you can read up on, but at the end of the day, every one of our 46 tax jurisdictions has different laws, and that's really hard to do independently. Look at every
Yeah.
right, Shelley, would you do that? Look at the law for every state and try to
No.
apply it for your business practice, and you have multiple entities you mentioned, right? So that's just overwhelming
Yeah.
for you to
Yeah.
sit down and do. So
Yeah, I wanna
partner with
jump off a
someone.
bridge
Yeah,
just thinking
exactly.
about it.
I totally get it. Yep.
But what I love is that and I want to be sure that our listeners and viewers get this as a takeaway. The reality of it is you don't have to jump in with both feet. What you
Correct.
can do, it looks like, it sounds like, is get started by simply doing a risk assessment.
Mhm.
And again, we don't know what we don't know until we know. So looking at, doing this assessment, it's a way to get started, to understand the landscape of what it is we're looking at, to learn about the compliance issues or other risks that you may or may not have ever even realized were a thing, and then make a decision on what to do, where to go from there. And
Absolutely.
yeah, that,
Those risk assessments, I always tell our customers they're an independent report
yeah,
from which you can make educated business decisions.
yeah,
Without that information, you're just guessing.
yeah,
So do
absolutely.
that, get that independent study, get that assessment, documented and understand what your liability is. Then step 2 is what's the
Right.
solution.
Right, that makes perfect sense. Well, I will say that I remember years ago, I used to, I've never done my taxes myself, but a lot of years and years, like 20 years ago, I was doing, trying to keep up with my own bookkeeping and everything else. I've always had, I had a relatively small company back then. And I remember when I finally hired somebody and handed that over. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, why did I take so long to do this? And it was, some of it's a matter of trust, right? And, finding the right
Mhm.
partner and everything else. But it's just like, oh my gosh, this changed everything about my life. It changed everything about my business stress and frustration. And, I mean, when you're, in your 30s and running your first business, there's lessons to learn along the way, right? But the reality of it is, as a 20 plus year professional, what I've learned is that I don't want to do the things, I don't want to be my own lawyer. I don't want to be my own accountant. I don't want
Right.
to be my risk assessment
Right.
professional.
No, you do.
I'm
Mhm.
not good at that. What I want to do all day long are the things that I'm really good at and that people hire me to do. And so I think that understanding, and we have this conversation here at Futurum a lot as it relates to really anything today, the path forward, the smart path forward for most businesses, regardless of what it is you're thinking about doing, is smart strategic partnerships. Business is complicated. And the idea that we should somehow be able to have the knowledge base and the capability and the resources to do everything ourselves is the most outdated way of thinking, period.
Mhm.
Whether you're a small to mid-sized business, or of course, if you're an enterprise business, that's impossible. So I think, part of your comment in terms of the value proposition that Avalara brings to the fore is that, you have the ability to partner with your clients and really bring that level of expertise that they don't have and reduce their business worries and workload and frustrations. And to me, that sounds like a welcome offering.
For sure. I have seen in many businesses that I've talked to when they start to look at automation and doing this risk assessment, their instant reaction sometimes is say, "Well, I can just hire someone." Well, actually, you can't, Shelley. That person doesn't exist.
It does
That
not.
a human doesn't replace
No.
automation. And another thing about tax compliance is it touches so many people in your business. One
Right.
human is not doing it all. There are probably 4 or
Right.
5 people in anybody's organization that
Yeah.
touch tax compliance. There's filing, there's collecting exemption certificates, there's putting tax rates in your system, there's use tax, there's all that, and it's touched by different people. So the answer is not hire more people.
It is
It
not.
it's that's not the answer. The answer is leverage partners and automation
Yeah.
that have information centralized that you can trust, right? A
Yeah.
person, there's always human error and that person doesn't exist. So I it's very, very funny that people equate a cost of automation with a person when it's
Right.
not really apples to apples. So,
Right. Well, and what we know is that the reality today is that for most businesses, there's a perfect marriage of technology, people, and processes. And it's not like, technology alone is never the answer, and people
right,
alone today are not
right.
the answer. But it really is this magic combination of the right people, the right processes, relying on the right technology solutions,
Yep.
and that's the difference maker. And by the way, that formula is true regardless of the size of your organization.
I agree.
So
I
yeah.
totally agree. Yeah. Yeah. Some people say, "Oh, we're too small for tax
No, you're
automation."
not.
No, you're not. Yeah, see?
No, you're
There,
not.
you answered before I did. No, you're not. I mean, like I said, our
Yeah.
founder, Scott, created the company because small and medium-sized
Yeah.
businesses need to have a easy way to do this. And the other thing I want
Absolutely.
to add is states do not make it easy for you as
No.
business owner to do your job. When they implement a new tax or a new process, they don't care how hard it is for you to remit it to
No.
them. They just want their money. They do not
Now.
care
Yeah.
how many hoops you have to jump through or employees you have to hire or whatever you have to put in
No.
place. They don't care.
They don't care. They just want their money. So let's talk about automating tax compliance
Oh, my
and
favorite thing.
why SAP users should automate their compliance right now.
Yeah, so SAP users tend to be heavily in manufacturing, distribution, larger
Right.
businesses, a lot of tax compliance, a lot of sales. You know what that means? A lot of risk.
Right.
So, one thing that I always ask businesses initially is people come to us and they just want tax rates. They just want some rates to put into their ERP, to put into their SAP system. Rates is not the end all be all. It's what I call, Shelley, the sexy part of sales tax because it's what we see on our receipts as
Right.
consumers. So that's where our brain goes. Tax is a tax rate. There's so much more underneath that iceberg of tax compliance. And a
Right.
business that's running SAP as their ERP is likely a sizable, complex business. That's where SAP
Sure.
specializes. And they have a lot of compliance that they need to be aware of. And so automation really comes into play from calculating those tax rates that you need to helping you do a way better job of collecting, managing those exemption certificates, making sure they're accurate, to automated returns filing, to your licenses and to tax research and all kinds of things. So it tends to be a complex business with a lot of people touching tax compliance. And exactly what you just said, the automation is going to help everybody do their
Right.
jobs. It's not going to replace any people. You still have people, you still have the
Right.
responsibility of tax compliance. But it's really important that you step into the automation age and out of these manual processes. I deal
Yeah.
with the exemption certificates a lot, and they're one of the few things out there that are still on paper. Why on earth are we still collecting these things on paper? Why? I mean, it's like, I don't understand. They need to be digital and digitally
Yeah.
managed and digitally validated these days. It's 2022 almost, right? So we need to get into the current century and do more automation. And back to what you said earlier, once you grabbed your or signed up your accountant,
Yeah.
every customer that uses automation, whether it's Avalara or anybody else, it just falls in love with it. They can't
Yeah.
believe what they were doing manually before that can be done by software and automated now. They just can't believe it. Ask anyone. And if you're
Well,
SAP customers who use Avalara, they would never get rid of it. It's
yeah.
I kind
No,
of liken it to, Shelly, you won't give your smartphone back, right?
never.
Right?
But the other thing I think that's so important here is that we are in a situation where, I don't know any business that's not focused on talent recruitment and talent retention.
Mhm.
And, jobs are a dime a dozen out there, and people are very particular about what they want to do, what they want to spend their time doing, what their career
Correct.
trajectory path is, and all that sort of thing. And
Yeah,
so when you can work with integrate technology solutions that help make what can only be called somewhat onerous jobs
yeah.
more enjoyable, more expeditious. When you can take that nasty stuff off of somebody's plate
Absolutely.
and use
Yeah,
automation to be able to do what no human can do at the
right.
same rate that automation can, all of a sudden, not only are you getting better business results, you're creating better work environment, better jobs for people, and allowing them to do the things that require a higher level of critical thinking, that are more interesting, and that really allow them to blossom and grow in their jobs. And I just don't think that that can in any way be overlooked today, because of the fact that we are in a situation where talent is really tough to find and it's really tough to keep. So when you can think about it from a cultural standpoint too, I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah. And your business, Shelly, do you outsource payroll? Do you use ADP or any of the
We
other
do.
companies?
Yes.
Okay. Same concept. Does anybody do their payroll themselves anymore? It's too risky, right? What's the last thing you
Right.
want to do is mispay an employee, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
so tax compliance is there
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
You simply have to outsource
Yeah.
compliance, especially if you're an SAP user. You just simply have to. It's
Yeah.
too risky not to. And what you said, your employees they want to be happy. They don't need to be running these reports. I had this call the other day with this lady that I think she was almost in tears because she couldn't get the reports out of her ERP in a format to give her the information that the state
Right.
was requiring. And I was like, that's where automation comes in. It's
Yeah.
impossible to do those. She
Yeah.
was trying to massage data in Excel spreadsheets, and that's not something that employees enjoy doing, right? It's
No.
tedious and time consuming and doesn't produce any benefit, especially when you're just paying the government, right? It's
Right.
not really
Right.
it's a pass through. Sales tax is a pass through.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's talk about Avalara just a little bit now. So it's an end-to-end solution, but what does that mean in terms of product offerings?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So there's a process to sales. You sign up a customer. If that customer wants to be exempt, then you collect an exemption certificate from them. Then, when you get to invoicing, you calculate tax on that invoice, and then you have to file and remit to the government, report in and remit to the government. And then there's all sorts of other things in between there. There might be some tax research that you need to understand how things are taxable. You might have some business licenses. So basically, anything you can consider under compliance, Avalara can automate it or assist with it. As I said, big, global company, publicly held company now, and we keep adding resources to help our customers. So whatever you consider compliance in your business, Avalara can likely help with that. And it's important to tie those things together and
Right.
not segregate them. You don't have one platform collecting your certificates and another type of engine that's calculating tax or some tax rates. and then someone else over here doing returns. So the end-to-end solution ties the process together. As I mentioned earlier, that the tax compliance touches a lot of people in an organization. So
Right.
you want to also tie that together with the
Right.
automation. So that's really what that means from the beginning of when you sign up a customer to the end when you invoice them and remit to the government. You that all that string of tax compliance process needs to be connected.
No silos.
No, it doesn't work that way, and some people
That's good.
try to do that, and they ultimately come back to Avalara. It
Yeah.
happens a lot, where
Yeah.
they choose one other system to do this, another system to do that. They ultimately come back. Our salespeople
Yeah.
actually know. They kinda giggle, and they put a customer who's done that on a tickler 6 months from now because they know that customer's gonna be frustrated when they
Yeah.
try to silo. And I just had someone the other day, I'm not kidding you, the other day on a call said, "I wish I'd listened to you guys in the first place." Not
I've
making
had
that one up. He
I've had
literally
some of those before. I understand completely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. This is hard, Kelly. This is a hard stuff. It's not
It
easy. We take
it
it
is
for
ho
granted, but
it
it's
it
hard.
is yeah, it's so hard, and it doesn't have to be. So we talked about compliance. Just let's touch briefly on what some of the things that can happen if businesses don't comply. I mean, again, you made clear early in our conversation, this isn't suggestion, this is tax
These
law.
are laws. These are laws. Yeah,
These are
they're laws, and
laws.
you need to be a good steward of your business and make sure you obey the laws. Kind of like speeding or anything else, right? Getting your car licensed, and your vehicle's licensed, like anything. Funny that you asked that. Just asked that question about 10 minutes before our call by one of our newer employees. What does happen? She said I was afraid to ask the question on our group call because I thought it was a dumb question. It is not a dumb question at
It is
all
not.
to ask what can happen if they don't do all these things we tell them to do. It's a great question. So, couple of answers. First of all, across the country, about 44%, 46%, I can't remember the current number, of a state's revenue comes from sales tax revenue. So states are very aware that sales tax is important to them, and that's where they get money from their constituents to
Right.
build roads, to do development, to take care of homeless, to, the county hospital, right? All of that revenue, that's our tax dollars. I live in Washington. We don't have state income tax. So we're very aware that everything gets taxed. We pay 54% of our state's revenue in Washington comes from sales tax. And there
Yeah.
are constant initiatives on the ballot to tax new items, tax different grocery items to get more money into the state because we don't have state income tax.
Right.
So the states are very aware of the value of sales tax. And these economic nexus laws, as we said, change the game because now more out of state businesses owe me, if I'm Washington, owe me income because they're selling goods into my state. So
Right.
now I can go audit a business in Texas that's selling
Things.
stuff into Washington.
Yeah.
So I'm still going to audit my local constituents, but those are my constituents. I have more fun auditing the people from out of state, and states are very aware of that. So you can
Yeah.
get audited, and if you get audited once, it typically checks off a trigger of audits, a chain of
Right.
audits because they talk or because it exposed another business or another process. You're kind of downhill from there if you get
Yeah.
audited by a state. And if you do get audited, I work with a lot of our accounting partners. They will always tell you consistently whatever taxes you didn't pay them, you can double that in fines and penalties. And states have
Awesome.
the right to audit you back up to 10 years. So that's a lot of audit, Shelley. Can you imagine if you were
No.
audited and not doing your tax compliance right? And they went
Yeah.
back 10 years to see what you did 10 years ago. And they don't look at every transaction. They just take an average. They're like, oh, looks
Right.
like you have about a 20, 30% error rate. All right, 20% of your income. Here's the tax you owe me. Our tax rate is 10.7%, right? Or 10.5, whatever it
Yeah.
is today. And they just do that math and go, that's what you owe me. And so it's risky. It can put businesses out of business. And they just really back to the stick your head in the sand. Some people are like, oh, we'll
Right.
never get audited. We're a little manufacturer in the northwest corner of Minnesota. They're never going to find us. Yes, they will.
Yeah,
I
they
hear
will.
stories. I hear them every day. Believe me, they will.
Well, and it's easier than ever. I mean,
Yes,
for
but
them
they
to
use
find
it
you know
to
what I'm
find
saying? I mean, with
businesses.
technology and,
Exactly.
I think it may be, 20 years ago, it might have been easier to fly under the radar, but it's not really
Mm-mm.
easy or sometimes possible now. And why would you want to try? Um,
Yeah.
but the other thing is that what business owners need to realize is the onus is on you. So if the state
Yes.
does that audit and says, "Oh, you owe us 20%," they send you a bill.
Yeah.
Okay, they don't say, "Let's talk about it." They
No,
send you a bill.
they do not. Yeah.
They send you a bill and
Mhm.
they say, pay this by such and such a time, or other bad things are going to happen. And
Yeah.
if you think that this is incorrect, and you need to hire a tax attorney, you
Mhm.
need to, and they're not interested in sitting around waiting for their money.
No.
So it's like, so not only is there the risk of this happening and getting audited and getting a bill that's, kind of an estimated bill, it's what you have to do from there as a business owner to kind of fight through this or figure it out or anything else. And so it's like that's a headache that nobody wants. So if
Yeah.
you haven't before thought about compliance and how important it is and what the risk that noncompliance presents to your business, um, please let that be the key takeaway from this conversation, is that
Yes,
this
that's
is
my
not something you want to roll the dice on.
it is not,
Mm-mm.
yeah, it's not fun. I have some businesses tell me, I've probably heard it all now, but some businesses tell me that, "Oh, well, we've been audited and we only ended up owing like $2,000 to the state." But they forget about how much it costs them to go through that audit and fight it.
Right,
They have to go hire a tax attorney, or they have to dig through their
right,
files for exemption certificates. How many people,
right.
man-hours, what was the cost to
Of
get
that.
that price down to $2,000 or whatever it was? They
Yeah,
forget that. And
yeah.
that's really important. It's it
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. Listen, you're preaching to the choir here because
Yeah,
I,
I
I
know,
want,
I feel
I
like
want
a good
all the, I want all the help I can get. I want all the help I can get. I don't want to mess up. I don't want to owe any government anywhere money. I
yeah.
just want to be able to, to take a deep breath and think this is taken care of.
They'll
So
also just one more little thing on that, Shelley. A lot of auditors will ask you for a list of your customers. You don't
yeah,
wanna expose your customers? They will.
no,
California especially. They'll ask you for a list of your customers that you sold, say, exempt to. They'll ask you for it.
right,
And what are you gonna do when the state asks you for that? You have to expose your customers? No one wants to do
right,
that. You
no.
wanna be proactive. Do not let yourself get in the reactive position. Be
No,
proactive.
this is not a good time to be in the reactive situation. So let's talk just a minute about, are there certain kinds of companies or industries that can benefit most from using this kind of software?
Well, any business, as you said from the get-go, Shelley, has tax
Yeah.
compliance of some
Yeah.
sort. No matter if I just sell widgets on the corner, I have a coffee shop, or I have a multi, country global business. Everybody has some sort of tax compliance. So I would say the most complex tend to be when you get into having exempt sales and customers that want to be exempt from sales tax, because it gets easy to fall into the trap of, well, we don't charge tax, so we don't have to worry about it. That's not
Right.
true. Any state you're registered in or you're legally required to register in, you owe that state the tax sans those exemption certificates. So the onus is on you. You already
Yeah.
pointed that out. The onus is on you to do that. So I don't think there's any type of business that should ignore tax compliance. I also think there's a solution for any type of business. As I said earlier, some people think they're too small for tax compliance, but you're not. And there's automation for QuickBooks. There's
Right.
automation for shopping carts, for little tiny shopping carts for that for Magento. There's automation and help for any size business. So whatever your compliance responsibilities are, there's a solution for you that's appropriate, that
Yeah.
will significantly reduce your risk and keep you from having to hire an expensive tax attorney.
Well, and I think too, a lot of times when we are hearing about or evaluating some kind of solution, some kind of technology solution that, I think sometimes we might have the tendency to go, oh, that sounds expensive.
Mhm.
Oh, Avalara, that's a big company. I don't
Yeah.
know, but as you said, it, you kind of have to understand that the kinds of things that your small company might potentially need are different from my bigger company and what we might need. And that again is different from what an enterprise might need. But I think that the needs across the board are the same. time, the costs associated with filling some of those needs are completely different based upon your unique situation. And, there's not just a one size fits all, one
Correct.
price fits all solution. So my point is for our listeners, don't go down the path of convincing yourself, well, we're not big enough to need
Right.
this,
Mm-mm.
because chances are you are.
Yeah, and it scales, right? You can start very small. As I said, you can integrate with
Yeah,
QuickBooks. It scales from very
yeah,
inexpensive for a simple business. It just depends on the complexity of your compliance, and that equates to your risk. So there's always a return on investment. And again, people can't do this, and people are expensive too. That's crazy. Like, I don't know why we think we would prefer people over technology. People are expensive. You know that. You've got employees, right? You got to
people are
train them,
expensive.
invest in them, provide
Yeah,
benefits. It's
yeah,
just it's crazy. But yes, any small we Avalara has over 30,000 customers at a certain price level and above, but we have over
yeah,
100,000 customers. If you start from the very, very small businesses that have some online buy,
yeah.
over 100,000 businesses. There's no reason not to do it. It's a very affordable. Automation is very affordable. And remember, it's not just tax calculation.
Right.
There's all those other things.
Absolutely, really important. So we are about at ready to wrap our conversation, but before we do that, tell us what do you think? What are you thinking about? What can we expect moving into 2022?
Well, I've covered it a little bit already. I think we can continue to expect the laws to change, the individual states to tweak what they're doing and tweak their requirements. We
Right,
can expect taxability to change. As I mentioned, states want more tax revenue. COVID did not help that. So they
right.
want more tax revenue. So they're thinking of more things that they can tax. So changes are always, in fact, we do public webinars at Avalara, and our tax changes webinars are always our most popular because people
Yeah,
want to know what's going on. So always look at that. And I think you can also see that businesses are looking more at compliance and automation in different ways. There's that the world is now understanding that compliance is not just a sales tax rate. So there are a
right,
lot of things under the compliance umbrella. You're going to see more and more tools out there
right.
to help your business than ever before. We've already expanded from just tax rates to filing returns, to exemption certificates, now to business licenses, right? You've seen these
Right.
little things, and I also think that the global world is getting smaller, as we all know. So you're
It
going to see
is.
more ease of automation on a global scale as well. And can we calculate VAT? Can we help you get registered in other countries? And you need to be aware of your global exposure. And there's a lot of new tools on the market to help you be compliant with that as well. So it's really staying up to date would probably be
Right.
the biggest expectation is just watch those changes and make sure your business is compliant with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Maria Tringali, what a great conversation. I have so enjoyed it. And I have a feeling our listening and viewing audience might feel the same way. So thank you so much for joining me today for this back to basics, everything you need to know about sales tax and compliance and other parts of this conversation. It has been fascinating, and I so appreciate it.
My pleasure. I loved being here. I love talking about sales tax.
Well, I do. I love talking about not having to worry about sales tax
Okay, okay.
and using a solution like Avalara's. Well, with that, to our viewing audience here on LinkedIn, our listening audience, thank you so much for joining us. I will include Maria's contact information in the show notes, so that you can feel free to reach out and connect with her on LinkedIn. I encourage you so much if you are thinking about, tax issues, stressing about it, wondering, worrying, whatever, make time to reach out, because there is no better time to allay those fears and to look at, explore solutions so that you don't have to be quite as worried or frustrated. And it only makes sense to get started.
I agree.
And with that, this is a wrap for the show. Thanks again, Maria. And to our audience, we'll see you again soon.